Indiana Jones has returned as one of the only action heroes that has homework. In the Dial of Destiny, they've dug back in time more than they ever have. What was a history lesson and what was added? Spoilers. Central to any Indiana Jones movie is the MacGuffin, that one object that drives the story forward. The Ark of the Covenant, the Sankara Stones, the Holy Grail, a crystal skull. With the exception of the Sankara Stones, which were made up but loosely based on Shiva Lingams, most of these are artifacts that are said to exist but remain missing. Indiana Jones takes a Scully approach again and again, insisting that superstitions are just that. And then the object turns out to have the power it's rumored to have. Or the skull jumpstarts an interdimensional flying saucer. Somehow. Most of what they said about the Antikythera mechanism is true. It is one of the only one of Archimedes' inventions to have been discovered more or less how they describe. Well, almost. The whole thing was found, and we have a pretty good idea what it is. It's the earliest example of a computer. It gets that distinction because the complex series of gears and whatnot can be used to calculate not only the position of the 5 planets that were known at the time of construction, but also the phases of the moon, including eclipses and Olympiads. That is, Greeks counted time in 4-year chunks between games called Olympiads. And now we both know why the Olympics are every 4 years. Archimedes has the distinction of being why math wasn't your favorite subject, and for being the most famous mathematician and inventor of ancient Greece. While the jury is still out on some of the things he's said to invent, like the solar array that could burn Roman ships by reflecting the sun, or perhaps his ability to move the earth, there's one particular thing he's said to have invented that Dial of Destiny leans into, that being the actual Dial of Destiny. In 2022, a group of British and Greek researchers credited the Antikythera mechanism to Archimedes. Some things just get lost immediately. Like the 10mm socket, or my keys. They were right there! The movie puts forth one of the potential ends for Archimedes, while doing math at the hands of Roman soldiers. They weren't supposed to do that, because the guy who was getting destroyed by Archimedes' devices wanted to meet the man. He was given a proper tomb, but no one wrote down where. It wasn't until 75 BCE, 137 years after Archimedes' death, that a man named Cicero, who had been assigned questor in Lilybaea, Sicily, asked if anyone had checked this particular overgrown patch near a bunch of other tombs. Archimedes' cylinder and sphere he requested to mark his grave was found, a reference to him discovering a way to determine the volume of spheres and columns, and then, 5 centuries later, they lost it again. Today, the tomb, rediscovered during the construction, can be found in the courtyard of Hotel Panorama, or it's the tomb of Syracuse tyrant Agathocles. Archaeology is hard. Lost somewhere in the Second Pupenic War between Carthage and Rome, with all the elephants crossing the mountains and all, is history's greatest instance of nerds versus jocks. On one side, the powerful Roman army tried to remove Carthage's influence in Sicily. On the other side, Syracuse and its resident math genius Archimedes. And, according to the movie, a pair of 20th century airplanes. Archimedes' ability to design things that threw heavy objects various distances was making all the difference, holding back the Romans. Syracuse was undone by a festival that allowed parts of the Roman invaders to sneak in and open the doors. Thanks to a particularly nasty dust-up in the middle of the 20th century, the modern world has complicated roots. Things like the modern computer, radar, jet engines, and most relevantly, rockets, were all developed as part of an effort to wage war. That means that some of our biggest developments came from people with questionable CVs, mostly through a thing called Project Paperclip that allowed German scientists who contributed to the war effort for Germany to keep their freedom so long as they keep doing science, this time for the USA. Chief among that acquisition was one Werner von Braun. During the war, he was responsible for the V-2 rocket, the first artificial object to make the transition from Earth to space, but was primarily used to destroy London. After the war, he made similar things for the United States and then became part of NASA, designing the Saturn Heavy Lift rocket that made the American space program possible. The question of whether the second half of his life makes up for the first half has been debated ever since. Mads Mikkelsen's character was inspired by Braun, who, as far as we know, never tried to travel through time with an ancient Greek artifact. Every Bond movie needs the thing before the thing. Whatever became of the golden idol that Indy lost in Raiders of the Lost Ark? Will we ever get a movie where Short Round refines the Peacock's Eye as part of his adult career of repatriation of artifacts? The opening set piece for Dial of Destiny is the Holy Lance. Or, at least that's what someone claims it is, which is part of a long history with the Holy Lance. The story goes that in order to be sure that the job of crucifixion was done, a Roman soldier gave Jesus a jab with his lance. Then, hundreds of years later, during a battle in the Crusades, a guy named Peter Bartholomew said he had a vision, and the very spear happened to be buried in the Cathedral of St. Peter in Antioch, managing to convince the besieged crusader to at least look. When they did, they didn't find anything. So, Bartholomew jumped into the hole and came out with a lance head that he said was it. Whether it was or not, the idea of it was enough to rally the morale of the crusaders. Peter, who had been noted for being a heavy drinker, became frustrated at doubts about what he found. So, he offered to carry through fire to prove its divine nature in 1099. The pilot that woke up in a plane about to time travel to the siege of Syracuse is going to have one whale of a story that no one would ever believe. He'll probably become a sci-fi writer.